just wrapped up another, I guess, Google I/O, and my brain is actually still buzzing with all the AI announcements. So if you're also feeling a little bit overwhelmed with everything that has been announced and all the noise, congratulations, you're human, and you're also in a very good company as well. So I don't want to stand up here and pretty much re-announce everything that was announced. That would be too cruel for everybody. So I thought I'm going to do the exact opposite. I'm going to give you a very, very short talk that is actually targeted and focused on only on the things that are important for us, the builders. If you're a developer, these are the things that you should be interested to know. And I'm going to make sure I leave enough time for us for questions or any other kind of information you have in the end. So let's start a little bit with Gemini, obviously, right? The start of the show. I heard an interesting comment in one of the conversations that were happening around Google I/O. And basically they said that, well, up until now, everything within Google was quite disconnected. There wasn't really one thing that could span across different products. Maybe your Google account, but then that wasn't applicable everywhere. But now we see the trend where that link for every product, every service, every capability is becoming Gemini. So essentially the way I see it is we're almost like now transitioning into the Gemini era. Like everything in Google is underlined by Gemini. Also, they also shared a couple of interesting facts as well. One of them was that we now have over 7 million developers building with Gemini. This is 5 times higher than the amount of developers that were building with Gemini last year in I/O. Even more impressively, within Vertex AI, the usage for Gemini has gone 4 times higher, 40 times higher than last time. So it kind of like we can see the trend that like Gemini is growing, but also adoption for AI and Gen AI solutions is growing at the same time. So what's actually new, I guess, with Gemini, and what is important from all the things that were announced around it? Well, first of all, performance. Right now, Gemini, well, it pretty much beats every other model in the web, in the web LLM and the web dev and the LMA arena, right? For now, at least, because we know how these things change. But we have a really capable model. And we also had the introduction of the live API, including a preview version of the audio-visual input and native audio out dialogue. What it does, it processes continuous streams of audio, video, or text and delivers immediate human-like spoken responses. So you can directly build conversational experience for your users in a more natural, kind of like expressive way with Gemini. Now, 2.5 Pro and Flash will now include thought summaries in the Gemini API and Vertex AI. So thought summaries really take the model's kind of like raw thoughts and organize them into a format with headers, keys, like another information, so that you can understand how the model went about to create that response. And finally, we now have native SDK support for for MCP service, model console process, making it easy for Gemini API to interact and integrate with other systems and tools. So I don't know, like I'm happy to make it a little bit more interactive, as I said. Do you have any questions around this as well? Anything you want me to clarify more? No? Good, right, easy. Now, of course, we had updates in Gemma. And, okay, talking to dolphins may be a little bit, interesting, but I did promise to keep this short and meaningful, so I'm just going to pass that. So let's stick to the important things again for the developers. So one of the most interesting announcements for me was Gemma 3N. And Gemma 3N is the first open model for on-device AI application development that is built on the same architecture as Gemini Nano that's currently sitting on Android. So what it actually means is that it allows you now to build live interactive experiences that understand and respond to real-time visual, audio, and auditory cues, like to the user's environment. So if you're working around with your device, we can have like direct live input. So now you can power deeper understanding and like have a contextual text generation using a combination of different inputs and outputs, and it's all processed locally on your device safely, so it doesn't have to go out to the internet. And then, of course, like that means that now we can kind of like start building really audio-centric applications. Like we can do like a real-time speech translation, or like a real-time speech audio generation, and all this kind of like stuff, which is great. Now, staying in the open source models, we also had the announcement of Gemma 3. And Gemma 3, of course, comes with increased performance, as always, and it's now performing much better than all the other models of its size. If anything, it's kind of like almost like reaching equal performance with some models that are much higher. It offers out-of-the-box support for 35 languages, and it has pre-trained support for over 140 languages, which to me is quite impressive for an open source, small, compact model to be able to use, with that kind of iteration. The context window has increased as well. We now have 128,000 tokens as a context window. And drumroll, please, one of my favorite ones, we can now do function calling on Gemma. We don't have to rely on Gemini to do that for automation. And finally, we obviously heard about the expansion of the Gemma finally to do some specialized stuff, like, as I said, Dolphin Gemma, Med Gemma, and like so many Gemma, Code Gemma, which Seal Gemma, yes, exactly. So the Gemma family seems to be kind of like building these kind of like targeted, yes, exactly, interested specific models, which is quite great to see, and they're always all open. Let's move a little bit to agentic AI. And that's kind of like be a little bit brief because there wasn't too much. Everybody talks about agents, but in terms of announcements, I don't feel like there was a lot of stuff that were announced. We have only two major announcements actually for ADK. So the first is that the Python ADK is now version 1 stable release. It means that it's stable enough for you to use it in your production workloads and applications. So it's great. Do we have any Java developers in the room? Yeah, a couple. So for you, great news. You don't have to use Python. Now they've released an they've actually released an initial 0.1 release of the same SDK, the same capability of the SDK in Java. I think like that's Google's attempt to try to reach developers in an enterprise environment, a corporate environment, which is good. Personally, I'd love to see even more languages supported outside of Now, we also kind of like have the agent-to-A or A2A protocol. And the thing to consider here is that for agents to act as a cohesive system, they need to be able to communicate effectively and securely, right? So the A2A protocol is being significantly now advanced to enable this. So version 0.2 of the A2A protocol, and again, that's quite early still, but includes two key enhancements. The first one is support for stateless interactions, which if you're building apps, well, you probably know that it's quite important and one of the most important things for you to do that. You probably need to use stateless architecture for most common use cases. The second part is now we have standardized authentication schemes, which means that we ensure that the agents have a clear and reliable way to verify each other's identities when they interact with one another. And to make things a little bit easier for us to interact with, we now have an official release of an A2A Python SDK, sorry, not Java. No, at least not yet. That's actually been released, and I think that this is going down the right path. Simplify it again for us to be able to use them in development. And I promised 10 minutes, but I'm just over 10 minutes. Okay, cool. Let's talk about developer tools, because that's fun. So I'll start with my most favorite one, which is Jules. I'll let the video play. So as you can actually see here, now Jules is a parallel a synchronous agent for your GitHub repository. And what this actually means is that it's fully integrated into GitHub. You don't have to use you don't have to actually use any other kind of setup. You can just straight into GitHub, fully integrated, no extra setup. You can work. It doesn't need to set up a sandbox to use it, so it works real time on your code. It creates. It takes the full context of your entire source code, of your solution, and it can reason, obviously within that solution quite intelligently. Now, as I said before, it does parallel execution, which means that you can ask it to either implement multiple features, fix multiple bugs, or look at different information all at the same time, right? Which is quite impressive. It also gives you a visible workflow, so it will show you the plan that it's going to take to implement them, and it will actually show you the reasoning that it has utilized in order to get to that outcome. And here's the interesting thing, which I find is it allows you the ability to modify that reasoning on the fly, before, during, and after, in order to guide it to give you the information that you actually need. And, fun fact, it can also generate audio summaries of the changelog in your code. So while you're commuting, to work in the morning, you can have Jules pretty much tell you all the changes that happen in your code base, which is, so much fun.
Merge might depend upon request.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, much better than
On that, have you used Codex by OpenAI?
yes, a little bit, yes.
Is it similar?
It is, but the difference is that this is kind of almost like a little bit more integrated.
Yes.
Within Codex, you don't have the ability to intervene into the thought process, on the flight, correct? This one you do, and also this one spins up its own VM. It takes your entire code base from GitHub, uses it for context on the fly, and then it goes away. So it's much more secure than having to do the setup that you have to do with Codex. That's the main difference for me. And audio summaries, who can say no? Sticking on the tools, if anyone is using Google Colab or Python notebooks, well, the promise is that Google Colab will soon be a fully agentic experience. It means that you'll be able to go to Colab, ask it to perform a task, fix a bug or anything in your code, and will just go out and execute it within yourselves, which I'm pretty sure a lot of data scientists or people that do ML will really appreciate that. Now, within Firebase Studio, you can bring your Figma designs using the Builder.io plugin, and there is a new functionality that, well, actually you could do that before. You could bring your Figma designs into Builder.io, and you could generate the UI for you within Firebase, which was great. But now that was extended a little bit, and now if it detects that your front end requires a backend, it will just go ahead and build the backend implementation for that as well. So it becomes like a one-stop shop. And I know normally, what the question comes next, what about the UI? Like you have to have the Figma design and everything created. Well, that's where Stitch comes in. So Stitch is a tool that pretty much covers the previous steps. It's an AI-powered tool that enables you to generate high-quality UI designs, and to degree the Figma file or a corresponding front-end code, but either giving it visual cues or images or anything like that. So essentially, if you combine those two, you could take an idea from a prototype or a visual cue, create the Figma design, import it to Firebase, it will spit out your solution, and then why not finish it in Jules? Just throw it in and complete. So end-to-end prototyping, which is fantastic, and vibe coding. And some final thoughts for me. I think the first one I touched on earlier. I think Gemini is going to become, it is already ever present across Google. I think there's a lot of investment in all the products within Google to use Gemini. I think that this trend will continue. Will continue on, and we'll see a lot of automation and a lot of AI injection in almost everything. The future is agentic. I know that everyone talks about it, but it will be. If you haven't had an opportunity yet to look at A2A protocols or ADK, I would highly recommend you start having a look at them. Maybe actually there's an opportunity for us to even do maybe a workshop or even another kind of dedicated talk to get people up and running on that. So definitely one of the things that we need to do. And then tools and services are becoming smarter, right? They all kind of like start having integrated AI capabilities, which is great for us as developers because it can take away all kind of like the mundane stuff that we actually need to do. And more importantly, validate things very quickly, which is the thing that excites me the most. So my advice is like, don't get, like, I don't know, to get flustered by all the AI updates and news. As developers, do the fun stuff. Go play, test, experiment, have fun. And I'll pause here for any questions. Thanks. I tried to kind of. Yes.
For people that have very little idea of agents and A2A and all of these terms that you use, what are some good resources to look at to get that initial understanding?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not sure if everyone could hear, like, so how to get started? What are the good resources, like to start with educate? I would say Google's the developer website. It has a lot of samples and quite a lot of documentation. I know that the documentation may be like a little bit, too much to read at this point in time. But if you come from a developer background, the best advice that I could give you is like take the code, take the samples that are in the Google website, try to modify them, work with them. And then if you have more questions and you want to understand the concepts, as I said, like I think I'd be happy to help. Everyone here would be happy to help. Maybe we can organize something a little bit more targeted. Yeah. Any other questions? No? If no, thank you so much.